This question is from Google Man. Google
Man.
with 3 O's.
All right.
As a drummer, I've been playing in church for the last 20 plus years. I can lock in a pocket without an issue. I find chops on YouTube and practice them all the time, but when it comes to incorporating them into songs, my mind goes into overload mode and I forget everything I've been practicing. Is the simple answer to just practice more?
Well, the answer is always to practice more. You're not going to get around that one. Sorry. That is ultimately the answer. Yes, to like everything, right? But I will say this. There is something about taking chops from YouTube or OrlandoDrummer.com, wherever you get your chops. I don't care. Whoever your chop guy is. There's something about taking those and trying to directly put them into songs, especially in like a church environment, that I don't like. Because it feels overly intentional. Like, and I mean this, I don't mean this in an insulting way, but like trying too hard and in some way missing the point. And let me explain. So I perceive drums really totally synonymous with learning a language in that, when you go on YouTube and you learn chops, and you're taking a specific chop, like a 24 note long 16th note triplet linear pattern, and you're taking that pattern, which we like to call a gospel chop, and it has a specific orchestration to it, and you learn that chop at home on your kit. That's fun. It's a really fun way to spend a Saturday. I've made tons of those lessons. I'm not telling you not to go learn how to play drums that way, but you are learning a really specific sentence within a language. What you're not doing when you're studying that kind of material is learning the language as a whole. And I think the ultimate goal when you're studying music is to learn the instrument that you're playing, to learn it as though it is like a language. So in our case, this would be all rhythmic. The rhythmic language is one that is very malleable. It is one that you should be able to swim around within, as opposed to just having a bunch of predetermined, memorized sentences. Because if you and I wanted to learn Spanish, well, there's one way to learn that where I just give you full complex sentences in Spanish and you begin to collect those. And ultimately, you could have 100 of those sentences memorized, and you could trick somebody into thinking that you spoke Spanish because you have over 100 sentences, and each one of those sentences has all these things built in it. So you are out here conjugating verbs, and you have a large vocabulary of nouns, and it makes it appear as though you can speak Spanish. But as soon as I ask you to manipulate or change up some of those complex sentences, you're not able to do that because truly underneath all of those memorized sentences, you don't have the fundamentals of the Spanish language. And this is my fear when I hear somebody say that they're going to take YouTube chops and bring them and play them in church, is that, that it feels like we're cutting and pasting with language instead of treating language with the malleability that it is supposed to have. You should play whatever chop or groove or fill or whatever element of this song. You should play what ought to go there. And that is something that you should be able to, I don't want to say make up on the spot necessarily or improvise it necessarily, but the idea that the perfect thing to play is something that you found on YouTube is very unlikely. It's super unlikely. That doesn't mean you can't do that. Sometimes that perfect cut and pasted sentence is the right thing to play. You could just get lucky and it works out absolutely perfect. I know people that have taken my YouTube chops and put them on albums before. That has actually happened. And it kind of sounded dope. Like, I get it. I wish I got some credit. But, it can happen. It can work out that way. But I would say for the most part, you need to take a step back from perceiving these as like chops that are to be cut and pasted and put directly into a musical environment. Instead, try and understand what is happening in the landscape of triplets, let's just say, because triplets are malleable enough, the rhythmic language is malleable enough that you should be able to rearrange and work out your own rhythmic expression in that moment instead of just reciting something that you got off of the internet. Merely reciting something that you got off of the internet is a trap you don't want to fall into because to me that is the antithesis of musical fluency, of rhythmic fluency. Fluency would mean you have this ability in the moment to sort of express what felt right to you or what made the most sense musically in that moment. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, all that to say, If you're struggling to put, these chops that you've practiced and you're trying to bring them into a song environment, I'm not trying to say that that's inherently some bad thing to do. But really, that is going to come down to practice and repetition. It is really sinking in what these phrases are, what these patterns are, because it sounds to me like they're a little bit blocked off in your mind. Like you have these chops are like, these are the YouTube chops and here's how they go. And then you try and bring them into this other musical environment and they don't necessarily fit. Practice is what's going to bridge that gap and smooth it out a little bit. But with that said, I would work on the fundamental subdivision that you're trying to play. So if the triplet chop doesn't quite fit into the song, like in church, I would say don't worry about the chops so much. Try working on like triplets as a whole, like study the subdivision of triplets, get comfortable with that pace, with that particular note spacing, and then maybe that chop is the right one, but see if you can sneak a much simpler triplet fill, or if it's 16th notes, work on the fundamentals of 16th notes, and then see if you can get that fill in the song, and then if it turns out to be the case that the best chop for that song was the one from YouTube, then sure, then you can bring that one in and it won't be nearly as difficult. By the way, if you want to study any subdivision specifically, I've got 5 hours of subdivision masterclasses on orlandodrummer.com, which really take you through each one of these individual like fundamental subdivisions that we should be studying. And this is oftentimes the answer when people say I have a chop and I don't know what to do with it or how to fit it in here. Very oftentimes the answer is to study the original subdivision instead of getting caught in the weeds on a specific like YouTube chop. So anyway, I could rant on this topic for a long time. I know that was a long answer, but it's a complicated question. But thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It was a good question.
Cool. Thank you, Google, man.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Orlando Drummer Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're looking for more content like this, you are formally invited to come join me on orlandodrummer.com. It's my online drum school. It's very much in the style of Netflix for drum lessons. There you'll find 160 hours of lesson content. That's like 50 drum DVDs. It's a lot. You'll also find the world's largest collection of drumless play-alongs. Trust me, you'll find something you love, and we would love to have you on board. orlandodrummer.com. Link is in the description.